Story 1. Humanity is still doing many of the things it was ashamed of doing last century. The same will apply next century. Story 2. Unless a serious event occurs before then, humanity will be immune to shame because there will be no solid culture left and every rule will become flexible. Story 3. Probably how we treated the planet and each other. From environmental destruction to inequality and war, future generations might wonder how we allowed it all to happen. Story 4. How we treat animals is unacceptable. Animal testing, factory farming, and lenient sentences for animal abuse are criminal. Story 5. Not taking climate change seriously. Failing to learn the lessons of embracing fascism repeatedly. Thinking corporate profit should measure how efficient and effective a socio-political economy is functioning. Creating an international political economy that elevates narcissistic sociopaths and rewards them with wealth and power. Story 6. You are assuming the next century will be better. I am guessing more likely people will look back on this time as quaint antiquity when there were still jobs and life was still easy. Story 7. Allow artificial intelligence to take over certain historically human imagination-driven careers, such as art, writing, and movies. Additionally, use artificial intelligence to further enrich the few rather than freeing the masses to have more leisure time with families while still affording basic human necessities. Story 8. Dancing in shopping aisles, offbeat while miming words to a small screen as if it is contributing to society. Story 9. If we live that long and develop a moral compass with our society, it will probably focus on microplastics, poisoning our water and air, overfishing our oceans, and lack of empathy towards people and countries less fortunate. There are probably more issues, who knows? Story 10. That is bold to assume that humanity can feel shame. Individual humans, sure. But humanity seems thrilled to do shameful things. Story 11. Bold of you to assume that humanity will last much longer, given that we are in the process of making the planet uninhabitable. Story 12. Short-term profits over long-term pro-social economic prosperity and ecological harmony. We have enough resources and wealth right now to end world hunger and provide housing for every single person on the planet. Story 13. Archaeologists discovering lip fillers and Brazilian but lift-on skeletons. Edit. It seems there are people who have not seen Adam W. Story 14. The treatment of women in the Middle East and how the entire world has done nothing to stop gender apartheid occurring every day among 1 billion people. Story 15. Humanity is doing the same things it has always done, just with new appearances and variations. It will continue to do the same with new appearances and variations. Story 16. Humanity is using a device built by slaves, often child slaves, to complain about past slavery while doing nothing about present slavery. Story 17. First world countries' treatment of the homeless is troubling. It is shocking that many people simply walk by those in cities who are in such a desperate state. It will be a shame, and future generations will think of us as monsters for allowing homelessness to continue. Story 18. We should be most embarrassed about how much propaganda was spread and believed. It is easy for humans to be manipulated through the devices we have right now. It is pathetic that we learn nothing from the past. Story 19. I would say nothing. Shame and common sense are rare commodities that we now lack. It would be great if we could bring those back. Story 20. Probably the fact that we put litter boxes in public schools. They are going to think we just had random cats walking in high schools across the country. Story 21. Probably the part where we let people die because they could not afford insulin, while billionaires were buying yachts that need a crew of 40. Just a guess. Story 22. I know this is going to get me downvoted like crazy. Abortion. I think hundreds of years from now it will be viewed with the same level of barbarism we view the Aztecs for practicing human sacrifice. Story 23. We continue to push for an economic system where 1% of the population lives lavishly, 9% live decently, 10% live okay but are one paycheck away from absolute ruin, and 80% are meant to live in a state of perpetual worry and trauma about why this is considered a fair life. Story 24. I can only hope it will be war. That would be something. Humans realize the futility of killing each other. Story 25. The televised and recorded genocide in Gaza will be in textbooks. It will explain why international law and Western democracy are not taken seriously by the rest of the world and was the catalyst for the actual shift of the global South to align with world powers other than the United States. You just cannot trust the European Union and the United States. Their word is no good. Story 26. It is amusing that you think we will last a century. I am not referring to global warming, war, or famine. I am saying that I am very close to killing you all. Story 27. Validation. Social media is getting out of hand. The value of receiving a like or a follower is higher than ever before. The bubble will burst in the next few decades, followed by shame. Story 28. Abortion, just like how we condemn ancient civilizations for human and child sacrifice, is the same thing. Story 29. The fact that nothing was done about climate change. The fact that our current era is failing to control billionaires. Story 30. How this country willingly voted for a criminal is surprising. It will take decades to undo his damage, if it can be undone at all. Story 31. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hiring based on skin color, sexual orientation, or other classifications only further separates people. Story 32. Letting the standard of what is acceptable and what is not in public or mental health decline. No one has morals, and they would rather claim autism than accept responsibility and work on themselves. Story 33. Very nearly every imaginable aspect of human society has been infested by the worst kind of idiocy and moral bankruptcy. Story 34. Probably forgetting where one left the bag of berries, given we will likely be back in the Stone Age. Story 35. We have the ability to feed and house every person on this earth. We can heal sickness and have technology to provide unlimited energy without destroying the environment. Instead of governments addressing these issues, they accepted a relatively small payoff from a few powerful families who chose to monetize humanity. Story 36. I would say the rise in coming conflicts risks becoming a third world war, but leaders always insulate themselves from their failings by showering the poor, broken young people with medals and glory. Story 37. Everything we use in the modern world comes from mining, which destroys many natural habitats and involves poor working conditions for workers. Story 38. How much we have failed and are failing the current generation of children. The horror of their literacy rates is overshadowed by the horror of their general lack of hope, curiosity, or self-sufficiency. Many of them may still overcome these challenges, but we certainly did not pave the way for them. Story 39. Everything up until the point where reparations are mentioned, then it is back to pearl clutching and it is not our responsibility. Story 41. The total ignorance of the environment. The unfair difference in how people have to live because resources are not shared. Story 41. If we even make it there, I believe that humanity will be very ashamed of what they have done to each other. People will be divided and angry at each other. The world will be split up. Story 42. Humanity has never changed, and we will continue as we always have. Each new generation does the same things, only with different tools. Story 43. The rise of plutocracy and autocracy. Missed opportunities to minimize the impact of global warming and the resulting mass die-offs of animal species. The continued existence of severe poverty while the top 1% of the population became richer. The persistence of misogyny, homophobia, and racism into the 21st century. Genocide, raising children on screens instead of conversing, playing with them, and teaching them right from wrong. Story 44. Humanity seems to have given up on shame. No low seems too low. I am encouraged that someone believes shame will exist 100 years from now. Story 45. I do not feel shame for anything done in the past. If I did not do it personally, I do not feel shame. Those who do are wasting their energy on something that can never be righted. Story 46. There are many good answers, but I will say the fact that we did not change despite all the cautionary tales. Story 47. How reductions in energy use were offset by cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence, and the increasing size of private cars. The relative ease of avoiding climate breakdown if those developments had been managed. Story 48. The roving bands of cannibals that somehow manage to survive all the upcoming climate change disasters and famines probably will not be ashamed of anything. Story 49. War and division. As long as humanity allows division to escalate to the point of war over resources, land, or hatred, we are doomed. We should be ashamed of ourselves for still resorting to war in the year 2025. It clearly demonstrates how incapable we are of higher intellect as a species, and it is sad. Story 50. The art of the 2010s decade. The unapologetically artistically bankrupt work that has been produced is infuriating. The past decade will surely be studied and critiqued by future artists. Story 51. The fact that they make excuses for why they could not already have a better world and the lack of effort being applied overall to improve the world back then. Story 52. That we did not raise enough of a holler to throw all the billionaires into the sun when we had the chance. Story 53. Not taking action against climate change before it was too late. Even today, discussing climate change leads to debates, although scientists have warned about the dangers for more than a century. This should be an issue where the entire world works together to implement meaningful changes. Instead, we hold conferences every few years where no significant decisions are made, and statements are watered down to the point they are barely worth reading. Story 54. First, it is helpful to look at what humanity, especially the Western world, is most ashamed of from the last century. I would say the top 5 are 1. World wars, 2. Genocides, 3. Imperialism, 4. Destruction of the environment, and 5. Inequality and discrimination. Looking ahead to the next century, reflecting on this century, I believe the list will remain largely the same, except that imperialism will be replaced by globalization and exploitation. Story 55. I hope we will look back at our crippling social media addiction the same way we look at smoking addiction. Unfortunately, I think quitting social media will be much harder than quitting smoking for some people, myself included. Story 56. Well, it kind of depends on how we develop. If we recover from some of the backslides we have had in the West in recent years, it will hopefully be the divisiveness of our politics and the privatization of social conscience and provision. If we continue on the current trajectory, I think we will be so focused on survival that we will look back and think how good we had it at the beginning of the 21st century. Story 57. Bullying. If we viewed verbally assaulting others with the same severity as physically assaulting people, we would be horrified. Online platforms would be like massive crime scenes. Also, eating meat is likely to be questioned. That change might take a few decades. Future generations will wonder how we could have been so cruel. Story 58. Well, little Timmy, we removed lead from petrol, we stopped the acid rain, and then we fixed the hole in the ozone layer. What did you do after that, Grandpa? Oh, we just stopped. Too much effort, not worth the cost. You know how it goes. The fact that there is plastic everywhere, and polyfluoroalkyl substances and other chemicals in drinking water, and the insistence on using fossil fuels is just baffling to me. I really think Generation Alpha and younger will be rightfully angry at us for not doing more to keep their world habitable. Story 59. Hoarding wealth, food, medicine, science, and resources for only a small majority. Being tribal, petty, and regressive in our politics, and not moving forward as we could. Story 60. How we treat animals in factory farming situations. It is wishful thinking to imagine we will become any more compassionate as a species, but who knows? We may evolve if we manage not to destroy ourselves. Story 61. That one time they tried to call out to someone and slipped on a banana peel. They will wake up in the middle of the night with the look on that person's face playing on a loop at the front of their brain in the dark, and it will be an hour before they can drift off again. This matters way more to most people than politics or climate information, unfortunately for those of us who want to make changes. I mean, that's the whole problem, is it not? Things like the immediacy of interpersonal needs and anxiety. The best humans want to fix big issues for everyone's benefit, but in the meantime, all humans have human needs. Story 62. Humanity will be ashamed of what we allowed artificial intelligence to take over and how slow we realized it would lead to rampant joblessness and homelessness. I work in development, and we rely heavily on artificial intelligence. It is going to eliminate white-collar jobs rapidly. You still need engineers to know when artificial intelligence is wrong and to bridge the gap of unstructured content, but a team of your top 5 can now do the productivity of a team of 12. Companies cannot help themselves but to seek as much efficiency as they can get, and that involves artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation. We started with 80 engineers when we began working with artificial intelligence and are already down to 50. When we complete and stabilize the artificial intelligence pipeline and move to the cloud, we expect to reduce that to 20. The goal is to reach 15 engineers in 5 years, if possible. The workforce is not ready for what is coming. Too many people got a good job and took their foot off the gas, coasting in their career for many years. They will be the first to be let go, and the job market is already showing oversaturation of qualified candidates in technical roles. There simply will not be enough jobs, and the impact will be major in less than 10 years, worldwide crippling in less than 20 years. Humanity is very slow to accept people living off the government, but there will not be a choice when there just are not enough jobs to go around. Story 63. All the deaths we allowed in the name of terrorism and fighting terrorism. When the history books finally teach children that terrorism was manufactured to meet developed country interests, it became something that got out of hand. Then we could no longer tell the difference between civilians and terrorists. That kind of trauma leaves a mark. It will be hard to explain. It is already hard to explain, but people alive today have seen how media changed from something trusted to glorified marketing and how it became difficult to separate fact from opinion and misinformation. It will be hard to explain that to my grandchildren, I assume. Story 64. Rwanda, Germany, Cambodia, Armenia, Bosnia. We allowed certain countries to completely destroy a particular race, either due to lack of knowledge or unwillingness to get involved. Story 65. Letting all of its people starve while they become obsolete after artificial intelligence replaces them. I expect either that or WALL-E by 2100. Story 66. Allowing individuals with mental illness and substance use disorders to live and die in appalling conditions on the streets while we merely watch and pass judgment. Story 67. As the inevitability of our chosen path sinks in, having set themselves on the path to extinction by knowingly destroying the planet. Story 68. How we took for granted cheap, constant, and unrestricted access to clean drinking water, especially in the Western world. Story 69. I think we will laugh at how we were never able to put together the puzzle of how we live in a simulation, how we used to fight over things we did not care about, and how we let the corporate media advertise bad ideas and buy our politicians. Story 70. The last living human will walk out of a cave and say, maybe unmitigated capitalism was not the best idea, before succumbing to whatever toxic hellscape or highly evolved pathogen eliminated the rest of humanity. Story 71. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. Jobless rates will skyrocket, and depression will increase even more. People need to feel useful. Story 72. Creating a superintelligence derived only from our limited knowledge of physical sciences or life itself is problematic. Our models of the universe and life are still in their infancy and insufficient. What we do not know about life and the universe far exceeds what we currently understand. We are like children in the cosmos. The truth may not be as strange as we suppose, but it could be stranger than we can imagine. The belief that artificial general intelligence will benefit everyone and not be controlled by large corporations focused primarily on power and control is a form of ignorance. Story 73. Judging by how well we are doing right now, the next century should be 10 times worse. I am not making any guesses. We seem to be on a downward trajectory and cheering everyone on while doing it. Story 74. When a better way to produce meat is developed, we will be ashamed of how we treated animals. When a better form of birth control is available, we will find abortions unacceptable. Story 75. Watching Israel commit ethnic cleansing and not doing anything to stop it. Allowing coronavirus disease reinfections in children repeatedly. Story 76. Selfishness and greed of people like landlords, chief executive officers, bosses, and that one bad friend. We can only hope for better. Story 77. Why should anyone be ashamed of anything people did 100 years ago? That is a weak and pathetic mentality. It is just as misguided to hold people accountable for the sins of those who look like them but have been dead for generations, or to carry the victim status of people who suffered long ago. This only holds everyone back. We should learn from those atrocities. People will always be divisive. In the future, people may be less informed than us, or they might be smarter and feel secondhand embarrassment because people today get hysterical over issues like Donald Trump and immigration that do not affect them. They will not actually sacrifice anything to help undocumented immigrants, but expect others to do so while staying in their gated communities. Those who lose their composure when they see a black female character, even when it makes sense and is not simply a lazy race swap to pander, will wonder why people are angry at each other instead of at the billionaires on both the right and the left who control everything to distract them. After the Wall Street protests, people had pictures of all billionaires and their families laughing at them while drinking fancy wine. After that, the huge political divide happened, distracting everyone from confronting the real threat. It was obvious people talked about it, yet there was no outrage. What a failure of awareness. Story 78. The genocide in Gaza that the world is ignoring. It is a Holocaust and the world does not care. Never again. Story 79. Humanity has no shame. We have done the worst things imaginable, including slavery and genocide. Yet some are proud of it. Story 80. Social media claims that men can get pregnant, allow men to participate in women's sports, and of course, the United States has caused significant global disruption more than once. Story 81. Considering we are close to hitting 100 years of Hoover and the German Chancellor, it will be Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu for the next 100 years. Story 82. Our inhumanity. We will hopefully look back on this time as a dark period before one of maturity, empathy, and unity. Story 83. Nothing. I do not think humans feel the shame they claim to feel. I think it is all for show because they believe they are supposed to act ashamed for certain things, but when I observe what people do, there is no shame in their actions. I am tired of hearing how embarrassed or ashamed everyone feels because it is just another lazy excuse not to do anything meaningful toward changing for the better. Story 84. Abortion. Future generations will be disgusted and ashamed that life in the womb was considered so expendable that women would undergo an operation that seeks to end their own offspring. I believe humanity will view the smokestacks in Oregon that burn the remains of aborted children in the same way we view the smokestacks of Auschwitz. You may downvote this, but you asked a question and I gave you my answer. Story 85. Nothing. Shame is something people seem to have less and less of. Did you make money? Did you get yours? Why feel shame then? Who cares if you hurt other people or contributed to a tragedy of the commons? Do not judge. Story 86. We will judge your chatbots and see how well you have trained them. They will be our new pets, children, and creations. Story 87. Lack of action regarding climate change is going to cause many deaths and reduce the quality of life and lifespans for many more. Story 88. I think the biggest issue will be looking back at the generations that had a chance to address climate change and chose to do nothing instead. They will feel the consequences of our mistakes in 100 years. Story 89. The majority decided that the best way to live is to be cruel to anyone who is not just like you in some way that can only be vaguely defined. Story 90. Needing therapy within the community, being told to deal with issues yourself instead of learning mediation skills, seeing how capitalism became our own selfish destruction ironically, and blaming an entire gender. What I will absolutely love is artificial intelligence addressing toxic influence, though it is a double-edged sword. Mothers not teaching boys to respect women, fathers not teaching women to respect men, and parents not teaching their children to be kids and enjoy life outside technology. Also, blaming children without taking accountability for our own children's actions as a reflection of ourselves. Yes, I have thought about this a little bit. Story 91. Politicians have no real incentive to serve their country or communities. They often pursue their own agendas while using a system that can be manipulated by people who inherited positions in our political class. Story 92. How a relatively small number of wealthy individuals and businesses collectively automated half the world out of work and into poverty. Story 93. There may be some things that do not seem like a big deal to us. I am certain about a number of them, Surely factory farming, but quite likely killing animals in general. If I had to bet, I think the biggest issue will be global warming. Future generations will look back on our period with bewilderment. Did we not know we were damaging the planet? I am reminded of a great line in Red Dwarf, when Crichton has his ethics chip disabled. And you thought this was safe? I did not think it was safe. I just did not care. Teachers will have to explain sociopathy and how sociopaths were admired and given power. The alternative is a nuclear war, which would cause so much damage that it would overshadow even that. Story 94. I think the Middle East needs to calm down. They have been demanding peace for centuries. As long as there are religious zealots, there will never be peace for them. It is really simple. Story 95. The actions of immigration and customs enforcement under the Trump administration, their deportations were our internment camps of Japanese Americans. Story 96. There will not be any humanity in the next century. However, I would say we should be ashamed that we failed to hold on to civilization, that we took everything for granted, and that we were selfish and warring. Believe me, there is nothing to be proud of right now. Story 97. I feel it will be framed as the working class being responsible for failing to prevent climate change by not recycling, when in fact corporations are the main cause of climate change. Story 98. The absolute injustice, lies, and violence that Israel is subjected to. Before you try to lecture me about it, I am from Iraq and I ran away from Islamic culture. I know what it is, and if people in the West had any sense at all, they would stop defending the most illiberal culture on the planet and start listening to ex-Muslims. Story 99. Assuming there is anyone still around in 100 years, I am confident that destroying our only home will be at the top of the list. Story 100. That we let fascism, Calvinism, objectivism, xenophobic nationalism, and fundamentalism fester as long as we did. If, even through armed revolution, these are eradicated, I feel our posterity will be glad to be rid of them. Opining on the thoughts of those 100 years from now, however, is often an endeavor fraught with misstep and folly. Story 101. Allowing unrestricted access to harmful content for children and developing minds. Over-medicating children and permitting unjustifiable medical interventions. Allowing moral panics to take hold. Story 102. I am going to take a guess that not doing more about climate change before it was too late might be on their mind. Story 103. Sitting around watching people who had a genocide committed against them commit another against someone else before 100 years have passed. Story 104. If humanity ever develops the collective ability to learn from mistakes and grow, then our biggest shame should be our gullibility and lack of proactivity. Story 105. Affirmative action and the entire race-based anti-racism movement present a paradox. In 1924, the eugenics movement was widely supported. This embarrassing episode, subscribed to by major world powers and respected institutions such as Harvard, is not commonly remembered today because it was proven false both on the battlefield during World War II and by scientific research after the war. In 100 years, people will look back on 2020 to 2024 and question why society became so focused on race, making it the central organizing principle. Sociologists and political scientists will analyze this period and likely conclude that the movement stemmed from a desire for political power combined with flawed social science, similar in nature to the pseudoscience that supported the eugenics movement. Future generations will find it irrational that governments and university admissions offices emphasize skin color or ethnic identity, as if these accidental traits determined individual worth. They will be puzzled by the willingness of hundreds of millions to accept categorization and stereotyping based on such superficial qualities. Some scholars might attribute this temporary irrationality to environmental factors, in the way historians link witch trials to specific causes. Human beings will always sort into different groups, as this is a fundamental aspect of humanity. However, determining these groups by accidental birth traits will no longer be considered defining. Just as gender is increasingly understood beyond binary stereotypes, in 100 years the belief that an individual's behavior or worth depends on skin melanin will be regarded as a form of 21st century alchemy. This flawed science supported a movement that benefited charlatans and misled many before the truth was eventually recognized. Story 106. the genocide happening right now in Palestine and how Israel is killing and starving babies and children. I do not know what the next century generation will think about us and how we completely stop talking about it. Story 107, wars and making excuses for them to happen, while in truth it is still a childish game about control and land grabbing. Since the dawn of time, we have been doing this. Story 108, we will pretend to be ashamed of the mass suffering and deaths of millions so we can please 10 wealthy people. And by golly, humans will please some wealthy person in the century after that too at their own expense. Story 109. As far as we Americans go, we have a problematic individual who has been causing significant trouble that would take many generations to resolve. Story 110. I've never experienced group or communal shame before, only individual shame. I don't think the average person connects themselves to the works of the government and so can easily absolve themselves of guilt, which I think is probably fair, but it definitely doesn't help us view our actions globally. You can see that happening by half of this post comments using the term they to refer to humanity or government. If we look at humanity as a single global entity, then unfortunately we have to refer to ourselves as us. Story 111. I hope I am wrong, but I think the world will be most ashamed of itself. The world has reached another turning point. The question is, will it change for the good of humanity, or will we once again fall short? There will be a reckoning. We the people must walk through this time with our eyes wide open. Will you walk with your head held high, knowing that you have done all that you can to pass this globe from your generation to the next? Or will you walk the path of shame because you have chosen to close your eyes, tune out, turn your head, and join the willfully ignorant? Where will you be when the consequences of willful ignorance finally devour humanity? Will your children and their grandchildren inherit a self-absorbed world? One where people cannot be bothered with what is best for everyone today, tomorrow, and in the future, but only with what makes them feel, look, and sound good in the moment. Who are you? Open your eyes and see what is passing for normal. Listen closely, understand, and question what is happening right now. Then act like your life depends on it, because it does. Where will you be when the reckoning comes? It is 2025. Do you know where you stand? Story 112. Best answer. They will be ashamed of the destruction they caused. Real answer. There will be no shame in the next century. Story 113. I think eating animals is something I do and enjoy like a good steak, but times are changing. I hope we will also stop warring, as that is primitive and shameful for thoughtful, smart modern people. We should also stop conflict between the sexes and try to get along. Story 114. All of our practices with food include genetically modified organism crops and the treatment of factory farm animals, and how unhealthy all of that is for us. Story 115. My biggest hope and most optimistic outlook is that humanity will grow beyond viewing deviation from social norms as a moral failing. I hope we deconstruct social hierarchy, that our cultural ethics are based on the paradox of tolerance, and that everyone uses an evidence-based approach to solving problems. Story 116. I truly hope that Generation Z wakes up one day and realizes they are supporting terrorism and anti-Semitism. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.